Nobody warned me that stash busting could actually kill my motivation and love for the craft. But I learned a few things that have completely changed how I approach it now. If you've ever looked at your yarn stash and felt guilty instead of excited, then you're in the right place. Hey, I'm Emma, your crochet bestie, and welcome to Woodvale Lane. Today I want to talk about what I wish I knew before I started stash busting, because I did it wrong the first time, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did. When people talk about stash busting, it's usually framed as a very virtuous and satisfying thing. Like once you've used up all of your yarn stash, everything will just click into place. I bought into that idea, and that's where everything started to go wrong. Now, don't get me wrong, use what you have is a very responsible and logical thing to do. But as a crafter, I can definitely say who I was 5 years ago and who I am today are two completely different people who need a different size yarn stash. And honestly, we like two different yarn palettes. Online stash busting is also shown usually in a very dramatic way with massive before and afters, or people just cleaning out their entire stashes and showing you what they have left. But we don't really dive in deeper as to what happens to that yarn. Normally, people aren't using all of that stashed yarn. They're either donating it or they're sending it somewhere else. And there is definitely an unspoken finish things and you'll feel better, which is a very tempting promise when our yarn stashes are starting to feel overwhelming. Now, all of this sort of set me up to have instant motivation. Like I was gonna get through my entire yarn stash in 1 year, and I was gonna do a no buy year, and it was gonna be absolutely wonderful. So I went into stash busting expecting clarity and motivation, but I walked into a lot of pressure that I didn't even know I was putting on myself. And that pressure showed up in ways that I really wasn't expecting. Once I actually started stash busting, I realized pretty quickly that the problem wasn't my yarn, but how I was trying to use it. You're not going to believe this, but not all stash yarn wants to be used. Some yarns are for very specific projects, and I find once you've completed them, you're not always gonna go back to do those same projects, or you have a very small, minuscule amount of yarn that you actually can't do anything with realistically. Sometimes it reflects old stages and phases of life, and honestly, that is totally okay. I kind of think of it as clothing in that way. Like things that I was wearing 10 years ago, I'm definitely not wearing now. So I don't know why I expect the yarn that I still am holding on to from 10 years ago to suit me now either. And some of the yarn just isn't me anymore. I've grown my skills and I like working with a finer hook and a finer yarn. And trying to force myself to use some of this yarn has really led to some uninspiring projects and a lot of unnecessary frogging. Another problem I was encountering is that finishing a project is not the same as enjoying a project. Last year, I had quite a few, at least it's done type of projects, and it was definitely missing that sense of pride that I normally have in my work. And that absolutely killed my motivation. And in turn, by killing my motivation, it killed any momentum I had in actually trying to get through my giant stash. This is definitely a lesser known talking point, but the rules that I had created rebellion in myself. My no buy and only working from my stash felt so restrictive to the point where crochet just started to feel like homework to me, and I was not showing up to do it. And then in turn, the guilt that I was feeling just replaced the excitement I wanted to feel. After a while, I realized I really wasn't crocheting because I wanted to anymore. It really was just feeling like an obligation, and that's when I knew something had to change. The shift for me didn't come from trying harder to stash bust or even trying to be more disciplined. It came from asking a completely different question. Instead of how do I use all this yarn, I started asking myself, how can I make my yarn stash work for me? And from there, I had to really switch up my mindset from how do I use all of this yarn to how can I explore it? I started asking myself what colors and fibers actually excite me and get me interested in starting a new project. And from there, it really made it easier to start letting go. Letting go of the guilt, letting go of the yarn that doesn't serve me anymore, letting go of the colors that I just don't like. And if you're on the same boat, I would say try and do the same thing. Let your curiosity and your creativity explore your yarn stash and really try and find what you enjoy about it. Because it's our hobby, it shouldn't be this serious. Once I stopped treating my yarn stash like a problem to fix and more like a resource to explore, everything started to feel so much easier. And I've actually started to enjoy my yarn stash again. If I was to roll all the way back to last year and start this all over again, I wouldn't give myself strict rules or big goals. I'd do it way more realistically. I would definitely start with one project at a time and not try to plan what I would do with my entire stash from day one. I would also let stash busting be a bit slower and more seasonal. I think a lot of us can relate to being seasonal crafters, so that really means we don't actually need massive stashes. I would also give myself permission to buy yarn intentionally, because sometimes to stash bust, you actually do need to buy more yarn to be able to finish off projects. Instead of measuring my success by quantity, I would actually start measuring it by enjoyment. Another missing puzzle piece, I think, to all of this conversation is that stash busting should be more of a practice and not a challenge. I also failed stash busting because I didn't understand what it was actually meant to be. This mindset shift is definitely the foundation of what I'm trying to do this year. So if you're also thinking of how you could change up your crochet or craft this year, welcome. You've found the right channel for you. And if you've tried stash busting before, I would love to know, how did it go for you? Did it make things worse? Did you fail? Did you succeed? Let me know in the comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video where I am making a fairy wand out of a chopstick. Bye!